Hi, I'm Bonnie Kemke. Welcome to my studio and welcome to Quilting on a Thread. So this is the 6th edition of my quilt journey on the Color My World quilt by Wendy Williams. So I've mentioned before that I don't necessarily follow a pattern step by step, especially when I'm doing paper piecing, and the way it works in the pattern doesn't necessarily work for me. I think differently, and I understand that. And one of the things I think differently about is the reuse of colors. And so in this pattern, there are specific colors that I chose for my skyscrapers. And the skyscrapers in Miss Williams' journey of this quilt, how she describes the quilt, those are the last pieces that are paper pieced. And I'm bringing those forward because I want to be able to reuse those colors if I don't use all of it in the buildings. And the only way for me to be certain that I can reuse those colors is to do those skyscrapers first, so that anything that's left over is available for the other houses. So that's how I'm going to proceed. Now, one of the things I alluded to when I did my Mariner's Compass, my Mariner's Star, whichever you like to call it, is that Miss Williams very carefully spells out the pieces that we should be cutting. And it's really confusing if you don't pay very close attention to the imagery and the instructions. So for the first skyscraper that I'm going to work on is Big Ben. And Big Ben, you can see he has primarily these two colors in the background. So I've chosen my colors and I have the background. So in Miss Williams' pattern, she talks about the pieces to cut for the building. That would be this darker color that we're using for the building. And she tells you how many and what size, and then she gives you a letter. And that letter is denoted on the paper piece. So the first cuts that the building wants is 3 pieces of a certain size for B. And B are these 3 stripes in this paper piece. When you, and by the way, her paper pieces are numbered. So this is number 1. Number 2, which sits on top of this one, you know, and we'll sew together. Number 2, the corresponding pieces for B are D. So B and D are going to line up in this as we put it together, and so on and so on. So you want to keep that in mind, that B doesn't mean the same thing on this piece as it does on this piece, because B doesn't show up on this piece, nor on the next, nor on the next. The pieces are piece number oriented. I know that might not make sense, but it will if you pay attention to what the instructions are telling you, and you make sure to look at the imagery, look at your paper pieces, and then look at this. If you don't, I guarantee you're going to cut something differently. So something I alluded to, you know, I mentioned that Miss Williams tells us exactly what to cut for our paper piecing, and not every paper piecing pattern will do that. A lot of them just tell you, here's your paper pieces, you need this much color, go for it, figure it out. And we all inevitably will be cutting pieces out. Some of us will even work with the whole cloth. Bad move, cut something out. But, and ask me how I know. But I didn't go over that very much with the Mariner's Compass, because I chose a completely different color you know, attitude, if you will. Miss Williams has 2 colors in her Mariner's Compass, and I wound up using 6 colors in my Mariner's Compass, 3 main colors and a light and a dark of each. So let's kind of discuss that a little bit more in depth here while we're working on Big Ben. So just like Miss Williams described the building pieces, she does that also with what are considered the window pieces, these lighter colors. And then there's a little blurb about the clock face. And I want to talk about the clock face. Miss Williams uses a piece of mylar. And then she fussy cuts a piece out. Well, I chose to do it a little bit differently. I took her same template, but instead of cutting it out of mylar, I went ahead and cut it out of the wax paper, the freezer paper, and I ironed it on to the piece that I want to use. And so what I did is, since this is the clock face, and Miss Williams is expecting you to fussy cut something out of her original background material that would give the essence of a clock face. And so I wanted to do the same thing, but I wanted to do it with the background material that I used for my Mariner's Compass. And in the background material that I used for the Mariner's Compass, there are several Mariner's Compasses. And so I have already ironed my piece of freezer paper over a Mariner's Compass. You can see the back of it there. I ironed that over, and that's what I'm going to cut out, and that's going to be my clock face. Now, I often will change a pattern or the execution of a pattern as I see fit to make it work for me. And that's the beauty about quilting. We get to change things up as we want. And so I am going to forewarn you that I'm making a big change about how the top of the clock tower where the clock face will sit. I'm going to make a very big change about in this piece, and so we'll address that when I get to it. But I'm making, like I said, I'm making a very big change about how that is worked, and that's because it's going to work for me, and I like the look that it's going to give me. So with all that introduction about the pieces and the cutting and following the patterns, I'm going to go ahead and go offline and get those cut. So I am back with all of the pieces cut out now, and so here they are. I got them arranged by, these are the window pieces. They're arranged alphabetically. One of the things that I do when I cut out something that has a lot of pieces like this is I'll take a set of pins that I have that have their letters on one side. On the other side of that pin are numbers. So for this instance, I need letters. So I have, these are the light colors, you know, the window colors. This is the building colors, all the pieces for the building, and my background. So each of them are arranged alphabetically. Now I could have alphabetized the whole thing, but in some instances the same letter is used multiple times. So I figured it was better to leave it organized by material, you know, fabric color, and alphabetized. And I'm putting them over here on my workspace so that I can easily get to them. And what I have set up here is I have my sewing machine and then a small work table that I use occasionally when I'm doing a lot of busy piece work. Normally this stuff is sitting across here and I jump back and forth between machines, but this becomes much easier for that constant piecework. So I have my machine set up for quilting. I have the proper foot that I need and all of the settings I need so that I don't have to worry about that. I'm just jumping back and forth. I have On this work table, I have a cutting station, I have an ironing station. You've seen that before, but I want to explain it, that's where, you know, how it's laid out. And then I also have that add a quarter plus ruler, and I'll use that quite a lot. So the first thing I'll do is start with piece number 1. And I'm looking for that first stitch line. So I'm going to need color A to iron onto 1, and I'll be using color B to put next to it. That'll be that first seam. So I'm going to try and get the camera situated so you can see me working back and forth. I'll just work through one piece here just to make things easier, just so you can see. So I'll take A and take back to back, kind of get that lined up in the in its space. Bring the iron over and iron that piece on. Fold my piece off. Do my pre-trim. That is the front, so I want to put that on here. Just kind of ease it in place. I want to be very careful not to sew through the paper. I want to sew beside the paper. That's really important. Come along and pull that out, fold the paper over. I want to come in and iron that. If I have to do something like this, taking a scrap piece of material to lay here at least keeps me from ironing the wax paper, because if I iron directly onto the sticky side of the wax paper, it's going to really be unkind on my iron. It can have a tendency to coat your iron. So then I'm going to fold line 2 out of the way. Pre-cut. Look for another piece of A. That's my second piece of A, so that's the last of that. I have a pin cushion under here that I want to stick that to. This is the front, so I want the front to front. Kind of make sure to line those pieces up as much as possible. It's important, once you get a piece completely filled, you know, completely sewn up, that you take that iron and press it into those pieces very well. So now that this one is completed out, I'm going to grab my standard ruler and trim it out. So I trim out all straight lines with the straight ruler. And at the topmost piece and the bottommost piece, of which this is one, then we have to take a pair of scissors and trim that edge by hand, since the edge is slightly curved. So there's that piece, that's the back of it. And because I was doing, some cutting and whatnot on it, I'll come once again with the iron and iron the edges, because this is going to sit until the rest of it is finished, and then I'll slowly peel the pieces off as I sew the other objects together. So I'm going to cut away, finish up all the other pieces, and I'll come back when I start to assemble them. Okay, now I had told you that I was going to do something different with this piece than the instructions. And this is what I'm going to do. For this piece, which is K, I cut 2 of the squares. And I have them already set face to face, front to front. And I have cut out from a piece of wax paper a circle the size of this circle here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to iron that onto the back side of these, of one of these pieces. They're sitting face to face, and then I'm going to sew around that circle on my machine. I'm going to cut the circle out, turn everything inside out. All right, so I've sewn this together, and I'm going to go ahead and peel the paper off. I wasn't too worried about whether I nipped over the paper or not, because what I'm doing here is I'm going to then cut this out, turn these inside out, iron it flat, leaving about 1/4 of an inch of material within the seam. So I've cut that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and create several little snips within this so that I can go and turn this inside out, iron it flat, and what I'm creating then is a place for a reverse applique of the clock face simulated piece that we cut out, that is part V. So we have all those little cuts, and we're just going to turn this inside out. And then it's going to just be time to iron. Now you'll see I have a nice clean pocket. If we grab our little Big Ben here, this is the V piece that will be applied later. But if we just set that in underneath, see, we're going to have that nice clean circle with it in there. So with this, you just pick which side you think is the best looking side, and you can either leave the pieces as they are or trim it. I'm going to leave the pieces just to give that clock face some dimension. So this is K. I'm going to put my K back on it. I'm about ready to start doing this piece. Now, because I've done something completely different, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to work this piece. So we have K. You can take that pin back out. Center that over the circle. Come in and iron that in place. And the rest of this is just as the pattern calls for. And then we're going to trim this out. Once all the pieces are sewn, now we need to carefully remove them from the backing so that we can sew them all together. And it's best to do them one at a time. And I've actually already starched these on the wax paper. A little tricky. If you're going to starch them on the wax paper, you have to spray the starch, let it dry a little. Your paper is going to be curling. So then you want to go ahead and press it down. And by press it down, I mean press, not iron. Press. Because if you start ironing, you're going to smoosh these around and move them. So this is piece 1. And this is piece 2. And I will start and go straight down the line. I'll be back when I get to the clock. After sewing the Big Ben pieces together, this is what we get. And if you look, that's the clock face. And doesn't that look nice? And then on the back, all I did was whip stitch that down. I chose to press all the joining seams open. You don't have to. You can press them whichever way you want. I just chose to press them open. Just to try and take some of the bulk down around the stitches. So I hope that the tips and tricks, the little quirks that I shared with you in my progress, help you on your progress if you've chosen to try and do this this quilt. It's well documented, and Miss Williams did a fantastic job. And like I said, every time I sit back down to work on this, I'm loving this quilt project more and more. So that's it for this episode, and the next episode will be the second skyscraper in block 11, and I hope to see you here. Bye-bye.